Hello and welcome again to another episode of The Search for Clarity, and this one is a super interesting and super exciting one. We are focusing on the Power Playbook, winning in organizational politics with Professor David Clutterbuck, a great guest to have with us today. So David is a distinguished figure in the field of management, mentoring, and coaching. His expertise extends to team coaching, talent management, and board performance. He has mentored and does mentoring around the globe today. He holds a PhD from King's College London and is a visiting professor to several universities. I thought he'd authored 70 books, but he's just corrected me. It's up to 80 books he's going to have written. I don't know where you find the time, David. Never mind all the articles and the journals that you write as well. On various cutting-edge management topics. He's the co-founder of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, a co-founder of a charity to support young people with learning or social disabilities using mentoring style approaches. Current interests at the moment include AI and coaching, which I think is a fascinating topic today, and coaching teams of teams. What else does your organization do today, David?
We're launching we're doing the last experiments on a whole program to create 5 million school-age coaches and mentors over a period.
Wow. So, that is ambitious. That is really impressive. So, David, this whole discussion was sparked by a really great book that I picked up around, it's called Coaching, Mentoring, and Organizational Politics, which you wrote along with Tim Bright, Lise Lewis, and Radhika Kusel, if I pronounced them correctly. And you really did a lot of research and explored this concept of organizational politics and what it means and the applications. It's a highly diverse topic. There's culture involved. There's psychological safety, etc. How would you define organizational politics?
Well, politics is at root the art of achieving things through influence. It's as simple as that. But it's what makes up politics positive or negative is the intent of the individuals exercising the influence. So what are you trying to influence for? If we look back at research around you, what do people really value in a really good leader? It's the fact that they were trying to achieve a personal agenda, but they were trying to achieve something at a wider agenda on behalf of society or other people, but it's beyond themselves. And when organizational politics gets negative, it's because people are doing things. They're doing things for themselves, so it's a big distinction between this basically psychopathic tendencies at one end of the spectrum,
and narcissistic.
Yes, and a lot of the problems with politics, with a big P, is that people tend to gravitate into politics are or very often the wrong kind of leader, the kind of person that is about for their own narcissistic ends, that wants to manipulate people and make things happen rather than really focusing on achieving great things. Now, there are lots of exceptions to that. But when you think that the majority of American presidents have scored high on the psychopath scale, and I'm not going to comment at all on the current situation. It tells you that organizational politics and the fear that runs and the impact of them, that it has on people's lives and their mental wellness is enormous. And so when we looked at writing the book, we were focusing particularly on coaches working with people who are in the midst of organizational politics.
And one thing I found fascinating was, even if you're not a coach, it's a highly valuable and informative read. It's very much anyone could pick it up and start applying it. It's not something I would necessarily say, I mean, obviously highly beneficial for a coach, but I think any leader or manager who's wanting to become more proficient at dealing with it, there's just a lot of really good content, practical content for them in there as well.
The big challenge is in that kind of environment, how do you maintain authenticity for yourself? Do you actually start to play the game like everybody else and manipulate and so forth? Or do you say, I don't do that kind of thing? If you take the latter approach, you're going to get slaughtered. I mean, there's a book called If You Don't Do Politics, Politics Will Do You. And written by a lovely lady in South Africa. And it's absolutely true. You cannot afford to ignore politics. On the other hand, if every decision that you make is a political decision, you've lost your humanity. You cannot be yourself. You're constantly putting a mask on and an act on. And worse still, you're forcing other people to do the same.
Right.
Yeah. Go on.
Well, I was going to say one quote that I really liked from the publication was that politics is like a knife. It can be used to chop vegetables that can feed an entire village, or it could be used to stab someone in the back, which I thought was a really clear, contrast between the two applications of what politics actually means to people in an organization.
Well, there's a lovely old quote that said that the politicians at Westminster were so confused they were all running around stabbing each other in the front. And I think it's a challenge for us to be able to steer through things and really exert influence, and in a way that it allows you to be yourself and allows you to think of other people and not lose your humanity. And I think one of the things that's one of the big issues is that there have been a couple of research studies that look at people's the way that people develop in the way they think about issues, problems, and dilemmas that get put in front of them. The higher up the corporate tree they get, or the power tree that people get, the more that people lose their touch with their humanity. So
I saw that research as well. Yes, and yeah, I've read that.
And that's pretty dangerous because and part of it's related to you. What do you see all around you? If all you see is figures,
exactly right. Yeah, I remember that.
People like a bunch of figures. There's a percentage of people that die because they're stuck in ambulances outside the hospital. It's just a number. But you're not there with that person when you see this happening. That's not a number. That's a human being. And
absolutely, yeah.
A constant reconnection with what it means to be a truly authentic human being in the midst of complexity. And what makes it more difficult is the more complex things become, the more difficult it is to counter negative politics. And what we see in politics with a big P at the moment, and is being reflected in corporate or organizational politics to a significant extent, is that when you've got complex situations which are which where simplistic answers don't work, you tend to get people producing simplistic answers because that's what somebody can understand.
Sure, yeah.
But then you get opposing simplistic answers because they don't actually see the system that people are in. They just see a particular perspective. And so what that does is to create polarization. And we see this in politics, in particularly in the United States. We see this at the moment. You've got people, there's no real middle anymore. There's no moderate middle. You're pushed to one side or the other of the spectrum. And that means that you have no room for real politics, the negotiation, the understanding of each other's perspective. It just doesn't happen. They become
right.
And so the negative outcome of politicization is that we get these polarities, that people are one side or the other. And they might in other contexts be very reasonable, but they automatically assume that somebody who doesn't see things the way they see things must in somehow be wrong, evil, have malintent, and all the rest of it. And those attitudes just get deeper and deeper, the stronger the polarization becomes. So we have some real conflicts at the moment, in large part because people don't understand the complexity of the system that they're in.
Right. Yeah, that political naivety is what it's referred to in the publication. Yeah.
And when people do begin to understand some of the complexities, then do they have the power to do anything about it? Yeah. There's a whole study of a topic called cleodynamics, which is about the rise and fall of civilizations. And it's quite fascinating because very few societies exist for more than 200 years or 300 years before they collapse.
Right.
And they have to be completely remade. And there are a number of factors that happen here. But they tend to be gradual and not noticed. People don't understand what's happening around them because it's the system.
Right.
And two things that they point to in particular in one of the studies I've recently been reading says that there's the process of immiseration, more and more people struggling to survive. And when you think, one of the quotes from that was that the earning power of people in the United States who in the 1960s was nearly twice that of people currently at the bottom of the chain, whereas the earning power, the fortunes of the people at the top, the sort of 1% at the top, have gone up by, I don't know, I think it was something like 1,500%.
Wow. So the divide is growing for sure.
The divide is growing. The second thing that they identify is the production of what they call elites, but what we mean is basically educated people who should be because of their education, whether they're doctors or, for example, they feel entitled to be earning a lot more, be much more comfortable and secure, but they find themselves being pushed down the chain as well. And when that happens, revolutions occur in those educated or what they call the elite in the middle. So the political, the bigger political situation that we see around us is often a reflection or reflected inside the corporations. So when you get the chief executive earning millions and millions, and the person at the bottom struggling to pay their rent, you've now created a dynamic which ultimately can't succeed or can't continue forever. It's got to at some point. So these are the kind of things. There's a context in which politics is taking place. But if in terms of using politics effectively within an organization, one has to define what is the good that we're trying to create. And so how do the decisions that we're making today actually help or push forward that agenda? Or do they actually undermine that agenda? And that's a question that's frequently not asked. There's a whole set of studies around the good ancestor. And the fundamental question there is to ask people, very senior people in organizations, how do you want your grandchildren's children to regard you? Will they regard you as somebody who created a better world for us to live in, or somebody who screwed the world up for us? And so practical politics at this level, looking at the systems, trying to understand what's going on. These are skills which are, I believe, absolutely essential for the future leader.
Absolutely. I mean, if I was in my attempt to try and define and understand politics, I was looking at some of the typical political challenges that people might be facing or be accustomed to when in an organization. And I think the publication does a great job in looking at this from different angles. So there's different perspectives, which really gives you a nice rounded, practical view of it. And I think the ones that stood out were things like information flow being a key one, sharing of information or withholding it, not allowing access to information, being selective with what information you're sharing, power dynamics, how decisions are made, unable to speak openly, how relationships are leveraged, conflicting agendas, and then lack of fair treatment being some of the most common types of political challenges one would expect to see. And to your point, the heart of it is the negative or the self, what's the lack of a better word, the self-intent of the individuals. So if you look at each one of those, they can be both positive if being used constructively, if being used for the alignment of the organization's values. But if you're trying to drive your own values in any one of those categories, you see the mask of the negative aspects of it, sort of resulting in an organization.
And it's amazing how you can. One thing I like to do is in a large organization, I'll go up and down the lift in the lift a few times, or I'll sit in the staff restaurant and I'll just casually listen to conversations. And what I'm listening for is, are those conversations the conversations that people had, the genuine conversations, or are people having the conversations they feel they should have?
Right.
And you know, that tells you a lot.
I could imagine, yeah. What are some of the most common misconceptions you think are out there about politics, outside of the broad obvious one around it being just a negative thing? What are some of the other misconceptions you think exist out there?
Well, there's a lot of people are quite diffident about networking. For example, and there've been a couple of studies that or more that suggest that women are on average feel less comfortable about networking, even though they're better at it. So there's this absurdity here.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, but recognizing that actually. Networks really are not only just useful for you, but having really strong networks is useful for the organization, for society, and so forth. That's how we get things done. Me Too happened because networks were established. And so creating really positive networks is, I think, one of the key, again, a key skill of surviving in an organization. But it's not it's partly about who you know and partly about who knows you. Key to great networks is what you give the network, not what you take from it. And here again, with the positive and negative side.
You spoke about political currency or capital, if I will, and you think of it like a bank account. Again, referencing from the book where, you know, it's you're either feeding money in to giving into the network or taking out from the network, but you can't just be constantly taking, or you'll have a negative balance in terms of your political capital. So that's a really great way to put it. Thanks to you.
And if you want to get traction for an idea in an organization, the bigger the network you have, or the better constructed the network you have, the more likely you are to get traction. And so people are used to receiving little tidbits of information from you, for example. You know, so you might be interested in this or that.
Sure.
When you pass something on to them, which which makes them aware of something going on that they think that you would like their support from, you don't necessarily have to ask them for support. You can actually ask them, you know, just wondering what you thought about this, and you can start to create traction, so a groundswell of other people without having to do very much. So it's the more that you focus on being helpful to other people,
right,
and actually caring about the whole network, the more effective you can be. And interestingly, there's quite a lot of research that said when people want to change jobs, for example, it's not the people in your immediate circles that you might most frequently connect with that matters. It's excuse me. It's not the people that you most frequently interact with that matters. It's the people who are much further out. You might not interact with only once every 3 or 4 months or once a year or so. Yeah, but because they have a good connection with you, they're the people who are going to tell you about things. I know somebody who could do that.
Sure, exactly right. Yeah.
And so politics is very much about conversations, and it's about moving, or effective politics is about dialogue. It's whereas ineffective politics is about rhetoric and polemic.
Right. So for leaders, I thought what was great about the publication as well, looking at one of those other angles of identifying politics, because I think that's the tricky bit for leaders, is sometimes to really being able to build up improve on their naivety around politics. Some of the trigger words, it listed out a bunch of trigger words, if you will, to illustrate if you have a very negative, political behaviors. Things like trouble explaining decisions, or talk of playing the game, where people's behaviors completely defy logic, or people having a perceived lack of influence, for argument's sake. What other types of common triggers do you see in those elevator sessions that you have that you can help people point to?
Well, I'm particularly looking out for fear.
Fear, right?
Because that's the one. That's the primary emotion that drives a lot of negative political behavior.
And that fear could be. Could be purely. It's obviously psychological, but what I mean is, it could be just based on you feeling inadequate.
Yeah. And
your behavior based on the feeling of inadequacy, or threatened by someone else doing a better idea than you, for argument's sake. So
yes,
it's a very cultural thing, isn't it, within an organization?
Yeah, loss of face, in particular, loss of position.
Yeah, sure.
Or authority.
Or standing, yeah.
And in some work we did with the conference board about 18 months ago, one of the things that came out, we've got an epidemic in the Western world, at least, of people with imposter syndrome.
So yeah, that's a good one. Absolutely,
is where you feel that you're going to get. You don't feel adequate. You don't feel you're really in control of things, and therefore you do everything you can not to dampen things down. So you either try and control everything, which you can't.
Sure.
But or you find some sort of tactics to play politics, to shift the blame for anything that might go wrong onto somebody else.
Sure.
And imposter syndrome is really damaging, because it basically means you stifle all the talent below you, as a leader, and you just, what it means is that you try and control, but you actually achieve less and less.
Right.
And a core skill, therefore, of a really effective leader, from current research, suggests that vulnerability is key. Being able to say, look, I made this mistake, or these are things that I made, or I don't know what to do now. I'm really ill.
Being comfortable with it.
Yeah. One of the things that I do with leaders, which is quite fascinating, actually, I might be coaching a leader, and then I'll say to him, do you have the courage for us to have one of these coaching sessions in front of your team?
Well, no.
Yep. And then we say, okay, if that went well, we say, well, okay, so do you have the courage to be coached by a member of your team while I just sit in and look and make sure things are going well? So you're creating that whole sense of psychological safety in the team.
Right. That is very insightful.
Yeah. And some of the other research that we're doing, we've done a lot of work in team dynamics. We have, to the best of my knowledge, the only instrument that measures teams from a complex, adaptive, systemic perspective. So everything affects everything else.
Right.
And one of the things we measure there is psychological safety.
Right.
And time again, what we see is the team leader and a couple of other people score very highly. Or they think, yes, this team has got great psychological safety. And you get other people in the team who say, no, it hasn't. And when you're asking people, how many times did something need to be said, but you didn't feel that you had permission?
You heard.
Yeah. And when you start to see these differences in perception, that's when, if you open it up and talk about it and try and help people feel that they do have psychological safety, then the politics are going to disappear. I mean, the negative politics are mostly going.
Sure.
I mean, you want to get rid of negative politics entirely.
Of course. It's human. It's human, right?
Yeah. But you can replace them. You can have a lot more positive politics going on that make the negative ones less important.
So if I summarize where we're at, David, essentially, even a replacement for the word politics is influence and impact, to remove the stigma behind. And again, drawing that from the publication itself, it, removes the stigma behind the word or the term politics, because it's usually associated with very negative connotations. So it's about positive influence and impact. And it really, to get positive influence and impact and positive politics, it's about leaders or individuals being authentic.
Yes. It's
about them having a very strong emotional intelligence, very strong self-awareness, being comfortable with being vulnerable, for argument's sakes, because they know their values, they know who they are, they're comfortable with who they are, they've done that reflection, they know themselves well. And it's around when doing any task or anything you're trying to achieve within an organization, it's about you driving your own values, your personal values, but it's also about driving the organization's values. Yeah. And your own values making you authentic, but those values being aligned with the organization's values in terms of it being best for the organization, not for your own sort of intent. Yeah. And that, when I try to, when I listen to what you're saying, when I try to bring it all together, is I think the boiling point, or at the heart of what positive politics or influence and impact would be. Would that be a fair summary at this stage?
Yeah. I mean, the idea that it has to be adversarial, it's not gonna, it's an assumption that causes so many problems.
Sure.
And what happens is as soon as you become adversarial, you begin to doubt the other person's motives. You assume.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good point. Yeah.
And that's why dialogue is so important. And a lot of the work we're doing now is looking at going beyond the individual to the team, looking at the politics within the team, and the influence, the EPI, exertion of positive influences,
sure.
Within the team. But now then we're also looking at the EPI between teams in the same structure. So right. you can have a lot of teams, each of which is high functioning, but the structure as a whole is not.
Right.
Getting each other's way.
Absolutely, sure.
And guess what? The clue to creating this positive environment is dialogue, and creating new channels for people to talk to and understand each other.
Right. What would you say would be the key skills to develop political acumen and resiliency to the negative politics, if you will?
Well, the first one is to actually understand your own values. It's amazing how few people can actually articulate what their fundamental values are.
I agree, yeah.
And so spending some time reflecting on that, perhaps having a coach to help you think them through, being very clear about what's important to you. There's a story, I many years ago, I was doing some research into high-performing companies. And I went to visit Clark's, the shoe people.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And I was absolutely astonished at the contrast between their sales rooms and their boardroom. Because the sales rooms, just money had been spent very, very extensively. And the boardroom, well, it worn carpet, there was a little bit of plaster falling off the walls, there was stuffing coming out of the chairs. And the chairman said to me, he said, just have to remember, the chief executive said to me, you have to remember the company question. Does it sell shoes? He said, we can spend money on staff welfare, we can spend money on equipment, on all sorts of things. He said, but nobody's ever come up with a good reason for spending any money on the boardroom. And that was great. And that notion of the critical question, will this make me respect myself more or less? Politics-based or authenticity.
Very insightful.
Yeah. And so finding the questions that work for you in being true to your values. Making those values, and the next thing is to make those values, articulate those to other people. This is the thinking behind what I'm trying to achieve here. Mm-hmm. So to linking what you do with the values that you exercise. Now, you may not always be able to convince other people, but that's not the point. It's about them understanding that you have positive motivation for what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So we're going to pull a pause at that point, David. This could be the end of our first section of our podcast. There's so much we got from the session. So it's all about, we got political politics, but politics. And what we've learned today is it's really about influence and impact, and positive influence and impact. That's the intent. And we use that wonderful quote around a knife could be used for, a village, to feed a village with chopping vegetables, or it could be used to stab people in the back. And it's all around people just being authentic and aligning their values with the organization's values, and in driving things forward and being open, and also, very importantly, being comfortable with being vulnerable.
Yep.
And this has all been fantastic. So we'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode, David. Thank you very much. And for everyone listening on the podcast, stay tuned. We'll advertise and market the next one. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. I hope you all I hope you all enjoy your search for clarity.